Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Around the World, where we talk about cultural literacy and being a global citizen. And today we're here with Amy Hutchings, and she's going to talk about her time in the United Kingdom. Uh, Amy, you want to introduce yourself and kind of explain what brought you to the UK?
Yeah, hi. My name is Amy Hutchings. I What else do you want to know about me before I get into the UK, or just get into the
Just a
UK?
general, like,
All right.
I'm Amy. This is what I do.
Okay. Sorry. I work at Lawrence University. I'm also I went to Lawrence, and I'm a proud alumna. And that's actually why I went to London. Why I studied at the London Center program that they had. I didn't really actually ever think that study abroad was going to work out for me, but it did, thanks to a number of pretty wonderful circumstances and a lot of support from my family to go and make it happen. So that's kind of what brought me to London. And I knew that there were a lot of really wonderful things about the program, particularly like some of the art and history there that was interesting.
Right. So you
So, and
spent,
it was,
mm, you
sorry,
can
it was
finish.
also a
Sorry.
good, no, it was also a good program for an English major, which is what I was in college. So,
Right. Well, yeah, because you're in London and like Shakespeare and
mhm.
all the other people. Clearly,
All
I'm an
the other
English.
people.
I know
It's all
nothing,
good.
not as much
It's
about
all
English
good.
as you
It's
do,
all good.
obviously.
No, it's fine. You're good.
Yeah. So you were mostly in London. Did you go anywhere else in the
Yes.
UK?
I was mostly in London, but I did go to Wales for a very short amount of time, for like a concert, honestly, which was pretty fun. Took the train there. I also went to Scotland.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so that was
Nice.
pretty fun.
Yeah. Scotland's one of those places I've always wanted to go to,
Hmm.
but like never happened. So,
Yeah, yeah. And at the very end of my trip, I like went over to Ireland and stayed in Dublin.
well, like very
Uh
briefly.
yeah, very briefly, but mostly my time was spent in London. I didn't like everybody had an opportunity to do there's like a 10-day break that gives people the opportunity to go places. But I between like doing what I think it was midterms at the time, and then just trying to figure out where I wanted to go. I was like, I'd rather stay close to the area and just get more time with it that I'm not going to classes or with all of my classmates constantly.
Right.
Um, but that's part of when I went to Scotland was for a backpacking
Oh, cool.
experience. Yeah,
You
it
backpacked through Scotland?
was a little more of a cushy backpacking experience, but
No, who
yeah, it
cares?
wasn't
That's
like,
awesome.
I mean, we went on a bus, but we were on a bus a lot of the time, but we also visited some cool places, different some old castles, staple cities that I'm not I'm very bad at remembering all those things, to be honest. So I couldn't tell you where we all went. We did go to the Isle of Skye, and that was pretty cool.
Nice.
Um, it rained a fair amount when we were there, but our bus driver was a ton of fun, and very into telling us like all the folklore of the area and
Hmm.
playing like music that was like a combo of like old music and new music. So that was pretty fun.
Nice.
Um, yeah, that was a great part of my experience. Sorry, I could ramble on about Scotland for a long time just because it was special, but London was amazing.
That's all
So we
right.
should stick on where I actually studied.
Yeah. Um, so when you were in England, was there any like cultural tradition or like custom that you got to be a part of or experience that you got to like that you really enjoyed doing or
No, that's a great question. So I studied abroad, what is winter term at Lawrence, which is like January to March.
right?
So there, we didn't like partake in any specific traditions, I would say, like as a group.
Hmm.
Um, but something that was, I think, very important to my cultural experience there was being able to go to all of the museums and
Mm,
uh, and performances, particularly plays
sure.
that were happening at the time. Going to the theater is a big deal there.
Right.
Are
Yeah.
not in the sense of like, oh, this is a fancy occasion that happens once in a while, which I guess is more what I'm used to here. Like,
Right.
you know, it's like you don't do it all the time necessarily.
Yeah.
Whereas there in London, it's like you go to the theater. It's something you do, and it's something you partake in, and it's special. But it's also, it feels to me, it felt like it was less of a once in once in a every few months sort of thing. And like
Right.
we did it every week for classes, but it was just it was more ingrained. I don't know how to word that better,
Yeah.
but it was just
Is it
it
kind of
was
like it's more like it's like here we go to the movies
yeah, I would say that's
frequently and we go to
probably
the plays like once a couple. So like
yeah.
is going to the theater there more of like a go to the movies kind of experience?
To me, that's what it felt like. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
And that's the sense that I got of it. It's been a while since I was there, but yeah, I would say theater
Right.
is much more like going to the movies.
What were kind of the shows that you got to see while you were there?
Um, so I didn't see any like mainstream shows because I took a fringe theater class. So it was like all these wonky, either like really fabulous small productions or like some crash and burn productions.
Hey, Crash
So
and Burn is pretty great
yeah,
every once in a
a
while.
lot of interesting social commentary in the fringe performances, like all around, but some of them
Sure.
were amazing and some of them were terrible. Um, I like, yeah, there was one that I think was about like a construct that like gained sentience, and it seemed like it was going to be a cool concept the way that they were going to do it, and then it went wild in like the second act or whatever. It went off the rails. And then there was a very cool, like one of the first ones we saw was like a commentary on the like a woman's body and
Oh,
stuff.
okay.
And they did that with very unique imagery and a little bit of breaking of the fourth wall. And so,
Okay.
you know, hit or miss. Kind of depended. Kind of depended. And a
As most
really
off the cuff theater is.
yeah, and we did see a more we saw like a Shakespeare performance,
Oh,
but
sure.
it was they made it into a musical, and I don't know that I'd recommend that.
Oh,
And they set it in a very different time frame than made sense for the
which Shakespeare was it?
storyline. It was Much Ado About Nothing.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, that's okay.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah, it was just it's a little weird. It was a little weird.
Well, I mean, if you've done it so many times, you might as well put it in some random setting
Mm-hmm.
and
The
just
lead, one
wing
of the
it.
leads, also forgot all their lines
Oh,
basically
that's
in
not
the
great.
performance that we saw. So that was unfortunate. But hey, it's like it was very cool to get to see everything, and I was lucky that it was like built into like
Yeah, it was
essentially
like part of
like
the
it wasn't
experience was
extra,
going
right? Yeah,
right.
it
Yeah,
was part of the educational experience. So, and it wasn't just like the students who signed up for the class. Every student, if they wanted to go,
could come with. Right.
could go with. Yeah.
Nice. That's
Hmm.
awesome. Um, so when you were in England, that was the first time you had left the country, right? So that was
Yeah.
yeah. So was there anything like different or just like new that you had to adjust to, living on your own in a different country? And then how did you like get through that and what has your view changed of that now since you've done it?
Yeah. It's a good question. I think if I'm thinking from just like the experience of like going somewhere new, I studied a lot of languages in college, but I didn't study any very very far into them
Sure.
into very intermediate levels at all. So I
Hmm.
it was good that I picked a place where I didn't necessarily have to
Learn a
like
language.
yeah, learn a language more deeply, though I think that would have been a really amazing experience. And I
Right.
kind of everyone that I've talked to who has studied abroad and had like that immersive language learning experience,
Right.
like that sounds incredible and like such an amazing experience. So I'm kind of sad that I didn't do that. At the same time, that made certain challenges easier.
Sure.
Um, I would say honestly, for me, like the biggest thing I had to adjust to in terms of like how the place functioned was that public transportation was so different,
Sure.
with like the tube, or the buses, and I had, I drive in the United States, so I didn't have the means to drive there, and that's a good thing because it would have been on the opposite side of the road, and that probably would have been challenging for me.
Right.
But yeah, just the public transportation was incredible. And at first it was challenging, right? Because so many people are so used to it and it's fast moving and you have to know where you're going. And we had our Oyster cards and we had to like
Right.
which you could have instead of like paying.
Yeah.
Well, you could pay through them, like you could update them. But we had like them set up for our time there.
Gotcha.
Um, and I don't know, it was very different, right? You had to learn
Well, yeah, you have to
all these
learn
different
this like map
systems.
and you have to
Yeah.
figure out where you're going. And like
Right. And I'm
I've
not
been to
from a city in the United States that has anything like that. So like for
right.
me that was a big that was a big change.
Yeah. Because I know when I've been to London too,
Mhm.
and we when we were there, I was there with my family, and we
Mhm.
always got confused because the streets like go on, but the names change like
Yes.
every couple blocks. And so
Mhm.
like, we'd be trying to get certain places and we wouldn't like using the tube, we wouldn't necessarily know where to go because like, it's like, okay, what station do we need to get off at so that we can get to this one section of the street that's named this? And
Yeah.
it's like, but that's like 6 blocks away from the station and like blah blah blah. We were like, it took us a couple days just to be like,
Yeah.
whoa.
It
It's like, why aren't the streets the same name?
yeah. Map reading was a very valuable skill, particularly map reading, like not just of the city and the city layout, but
Right.
like where the tube stations would let you off. That became a very valuable skill to pick up and hone. And uh, by the time I left, I have to say, like, I did understand where everything was to some extent. Things were familiar, so
Right.
it was possible. But that was a big adjustment at first, and I felt very lucky. I traveled with one of my best friends,
Right.
and she was really quick at. She became our navigator, so to speak.
So
So
she knew her
oh,
stuff.
she figured it out. She figured it out.
Yeah.
We only ever missed one very important tube ride with her. So
Well, that's good.
yeah. So I would say that probably public transportation and the buses just they felt so different to me. I mean, I haven't I also haven't taken a lot of buses here, but the nature of it, the traffic is just so much faster. Like you watch out as a pedestrian because the traffic's not going to watch out for you.
Right. Yeah.
Like that's
Yeah. 'Cause
another very important thing. Like if the stoplight says no, do not cross. At least not in London, like
right.
the actual city. Yeah, the
Yeah. Because
big
they'll
big
just run
city.
you over.
Yeah, no. If you go to a smaller city, of course,
Right.
rules will be if things will feel different. But
Right. Because
in the
like
actual,
because
yeah,
I know like I grew up near Chicago, and in general, when you're a pedestrian, if you want to walk, you just go. And like if they hit you, like they're paying for your life. So like that's fine with me, sort of like that's the attitude.
yeah,
Whereas like I feel like in London, they're probably like, hmm.
yeah.
Right. Well, I guess that's probably an insurance thing too, because like in England, your health stuff's paid for, so like there's no point in getting run over by a bus.
It's it's terrifying. Yeah. I just remember that one of my teachers used to well, okay, two professors. One of them used to bike everywhere all the time, and they had to be very careful because it's
Cutthroat.
yeah, it is cutthroat. That's a perfect description. And one of my other professors was absolutely terrified of any form of transportation. And so just to see the juxtaposition was like, okay, this is like very different than the feelings I have when I'm home and traveling.
Yeah.
So
No,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
The
So
whole it's a whole different ball game.
that was an adjustment. I'm not sure that that answers your question, but that was
No,
definitely an
yeah, that's
adjustment.
that's that's a thing.
And
I
just
get it.
I did eventually, I did get homesick. That wasn't something I mean, I hadn't traveled very far away from my family before, so that was also a new experience. particularly because it was hard to get a hold of. It was totally different time zone. I think it was
Right.
like 7 or so
Like a 7-hour
hours
difference, I
different.
think. Yeah.
Um, uh, and like that was challenging. Because I'm kind of someone who stays pretty connected to my family.
Hmm.
Um, uh, Seeing that in some of my friends too was also and classmates was,
Right.
kind of experiencing that together. On the one hand, we were able to support each other. On the other, it was like, okay, but there's nothing we can do because we're
Yeah.
like super far away.
We're like,
Uh,
we're in England, so
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And for the most part, none of us like we had like emergency phones that you had to dial a million buttons to make work for international calls,
Oh,
but
sure. Right.
we didn't use those. I mean, we would Zoom or something if we
Yeah.
needed
You
to
can
get in
like
contact.
video call
But
or something like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So kind of going off of that, is there an aspect of the UK that you wish was a part of the United States? So like, is there something that the UK values or that they do differently than we do that you think we would value from doing here?
I mean, I wish that the performing arts was valued as much as it seems to be there.
Hmm.
I wish that the museums were structured more similarly here as there, because a lot of the museums were free unless they were really special,
Right.
but
That's true.
visiting exhibits. So
Hmm.
that was amazing, right? Because the access to art is just
It's
totally
open.
different, and the
Right.
appreciation is totally different. So that's something I guess I wish was different,
Hmm.
and that I think about a lot, because I know that in the United States, the performing arts is generally underappreciated. I
Right.
mean, I know like people think about these big movie stars, but especially theater struggles more, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
people don't always take it seriously, but it's a really important medium and a really important um, responsibility to have, to be able to tell those stories and make those commentaries on
Right.
life. So that's something that I wish we had more like there. I also
Yeah.
just I miss the tube a lot. Like
Oh,
if I didn't
right.
have to drive my car, I mean, granted, right now this is not the perfect time for mass public transportation
That's very
uh,
true.
in
Yeah.
the world, but it was cool. It was cool, and it was fast and easy, and you felt so much more connected
Hmm.
um, than I think I'm generally used to feeling here.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I'm speaking from my experience because I'm from small town Midwest, so that's very different
Yeah.
than other
Absolutely.
places. But
Yeah. No, I mean, I feel the same way because when we were in England, um, so we weren't actually supposed to stay for like a week in England. We were
mhm.
supposed to travel to a bunch of different countries,
Oh, okay.
but the Channel Tunnel froze over that year, and we
Oh.
couldn't get from London to Paris.
Mhm.
So we were like, and then we just ended up staying in England
No.
for, it's like, oh no, woe is me. We have to
Yeah.
stay in London for a whole week. Like that's the worst thing that could ever happen. Um, but like we were gonna go to Paris and like Italy and Austria and like we were gonna do the whole shebang and it ended up just being England, which was fine.
Oh.
Um, but like, in our panicked, we can't go anywhere mode, we found a hotel and we ended up being like, I don't know, a block or two away from this like ginormous museum.
Yeah.
And so like one day we were like, well, we don't know what we're gonna do, so we're just gonna go to this museum because it's a block away. And like it was free. Like we just walked in and they were like, if you want to like donate some money, that's fine. But other than that, like, you come on in. And so we donated. But
Yeah.
like that kind of level of access
Yeah.
was like something that I'm not used to at all because like um like I grew up in Chicago and until very recently you had to pay to get in
Mhm.
no matter
Yeah.
who you were, and now if you're an Illinois resident you can get in for free.
Oh, really? Okay. I
Yeah,
didn't
to some of
know
the
about
some of
that
the
too.
museums. But
Okay.
like but even then now, like if you want to go from out of state, like as a Wisconsinite now, it's like $20 or $30 to get into like some of the
Right.
museums. So like just being able to walk in even though I wasn't from England, and just like they're like, yeah, go ahead, look around, like do your thing. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, and like it was a history museum, so I was looking at like like historical artifacts, and it wasn't just necessarily art, it was like that like political culture and like all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff
Mhm.
was really cool to be able to go and see that kind of thing without having to necessarily pay for it. So they're very much like allowed to be in touch with those cultural roots.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, here it's like, you want to see that stuff? Pay us some money first.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that experience that you guys had too.
Yeah. It's just, I don't know. It's weird that the priorities are so different. Especially because we like, I always feel like the United States, like it didn't actually work that way, but like I feel like we're like the UK's baby, but we've decided like that we're not gonna follow in mom and dad's footsteps, basically. We're like, no, we're too independent for that.
I think that's a fairly good description of the situation. Yeah. When you were talking about how you guys got stuck in London rather than getting to kind of go other places, the other thing that was incredible and I didn't take as much advantage of was that, like, I did have friends that ended up going to Spain and so many other places, right? And the flights, like, more regionally were so much less expensive than they would have been in the United States to fly from like Wisconsin to Wisconsin to Oregon. So like that's wild to me too, is just the different, you could get so many more places quicker for
so much.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. Well, I feel like, and that might have changed recently too because of the Brexit thing. Like, I bet it's probably not as easy anymore, at least from England.
Probably not.
But like,
probably not.
But the rest of Europe is definitely like, yeah, go wherever you want. Like, we don't care. Just don't do anything bad.
Yeah, I am glad that I was not in London when Brexit was happening the way it was.
It seems intense. I mean, it's intense here with all the stuff that's happening here, but they have their own intense issues happening right now too.
Yeah, I mean, there are issues everywhere. I talk about all the good things that I experienced and what I wish we had here, but there are obviously very many different challenges over there and some of the same challenges, right? So
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, what a year. What a decade. So this is definitely not as serious as like cultural expression and stuff like that, but do British people like American accents as much as we like British accents?
Oh, I feel like so that question when I think about that question, I think it's interesting to think about people's accents, but perhaps that's its own conversation because, you know, people talk the way that they talk. Short answer from what I experienced, no. I remember having a conversation. So two things. The first part being my like study abroad program was very different from a lot of them in that we went as a little like Lawrence unit and we studied with like professors that, yes, they taught at other places, but they also were like, they taught us in a classroom without any other students from other programs or from other schools. And you could like do an internship or something and that would get you more interactions exposure. Right? Yeah. But we weren't like as immersed into everyday life and everyday learning with folks. I mean, we were learning from living in the city, but we were still living like in our pod and within our experience more so than I think some programs have you do. I don't think that's a bad thing. It's just it's a different experience. So conversations like that didn't come up quite as much. Not that they never came up, but it just was different. But I do remember a conversation with a professor. I don't remember if the professor brought up accents because he taught British life and culture and he wanted to like hit on the point of common misconceptions when studying abroad in London. And so I don't remember if he brought it up or other students brought it up, but we ended up talking about accents and he could kind of, he'd been teaching for a long time, so he could guess where some of us were from. And I do remember that he could not guess where I was from, which I found interesting because Wisconsinites have an accent.
Yeah, right.
Like and it's very noticeable when you're somewhere other than Wisconsin.
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
and other than the Midwest, but he couldn't place me, and I found that fascinating. So that doesn't really answer your question, but it gets at
Right.
its own
Yeah.
own thing. So it was interesting because I think for at least the rest of that day, if not longer, for some folks, we thought about like how we talked and sounded.
Sure.
I do very vividly remember him saying that awesome was a terrible and utterly American word. So I remember that very, very vividly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I use that word so much.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a very American word.
It is a very American word.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah. Well, the reason I asked was because, like, I know, like in American culture, like the British accent is used to like be the other
Mhm.
because it's like a different sounding thing. And so, like, pick a movie,
Yeah,
chances are the villain has a British accent, which is
right.
ridiculous because like there's no way that supervillains are all English, British. I'm sure there are people from other countries who want to do evil, but it's just one of those things where like we as a culture have decided that like, it's like we love the British accent, but we've also turned it into like
Yeah,
the
right, we've
accent of
othered it.
like of villains and like
Yeah.
of like, it's like if you think about like Loki is a British accent,
Mhm, mhm.
um, you know, gosh, I'm trying to think. The guy from Die Hard is like has a British accent, but he's like
Okay.
from Germany, but he speaks British,
Okay,
like in this
okay, okay,
British
okay.
tone of speaking. Well, he's Alan Rickman, so of course
Mhm.
he did, but you know what I mean? Like it's just
Well,
like
and
that's
people
just
try to do fun British accents all the time, right? That's what they like. If you think about
right.
people playing games or like just trying to take on a different persona for a little bit with their friends, they'll go. The
Yeah,
first thing they'll
they
pick
always
is
go British
British,
for some
and
reason.
it's interesting, and I do think I think the othering of other accents is bad.
Well,
I
yeah, for sure.
because we need to like get used to it, and it makes everything easier, and it's also more respectful.
Yeah,
um but I think that's a very true phenomena that you're describing, is that especially British accents in film, the way that they're used in a very specific way.
yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think that's true for American accents
No, no, no,
to
not
the
at all.
British, but I do think they find the way we say some of the same words as them to be
Very, very grating
painful.
to them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, because like also recently, I haven't watched it yet, but that new Enola Holmes movie is on
Oh,
Netflix.
it's so good.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I want to watch it. I
it's
really
really good.
do.
It's really funny too.
But it's going to be weird for me because Millie Bobby Brown, I've always
Yeah,
thought of as like someone with an American accent,
but she's
and I
British.
thought she was from the United States until this movie came out, and then all of a sudden I was like, "Oh, you're not from here." And which was fine, like
Hmm.
that's okay. But like I remember I was watching like a press release thing with her talking, and she was like, "Yeah, it was really hard for me to speak in my native tongue because I've
Yes,
been an American
yes,
for
I saw
like
that too.
4 years now." And I was like,
Yeah,
that must be awful to like have a hard time doing your job and
yeah.
the way you normally speak because you're just used to trying to be like us. And it's like that's awful.
Well, and she's a young actress, so like she's also like in her formative years, right?
Right,
And
yeah.
so to have spent, I don't know how long she's been on, I don't know how long Stranger Things has been running, but like to be having an American accent in that for that long at this
Right.
stage in her life, and then to jump back,
Right, into
yeah,
being
to
herself,
her
speaking the way
typical,
she's
yeah,
supposed to speak, she's
yeah,
used to speaking.
yeah,
Yeah, that must be so confusing.
yeah, yeah. It's a good movie though.
Oh, I know.
um,
I'm very excited to watch it. It's just
mhm,
one of those things where it's like I've got to sit down and do it, and
mhm.
I've been doing things like this
Oh
instead.
yeah, no, this is good. This is good.
Yeah,
But highly suggest. Yeah.
right. Yeah. Um, let's see here. Um, was there ever a time where like someone from the UK asked you to be like an expert on your home?
Oh God.
Were there like,
Yeah.
like
I mean, probably all the time, but I'm not an expert really on anything related to places. So I mean, truly, like it's not my forte. And I think it's very important to be aware. I mean, there are people that know a lot about a lot of different places, but I am someone
Right.
who I will listen to other people's experiences to the best of my ability, and I will try to speak to my experience, but it's very hard to speak to like a whole
Sure.
place, and
Right.
a whole group of people.
I guess like what I was trying to get at was like there was ever a point where like they were talking about something and like America popped up and they're like, "Oh, Amy, you're from America. What do
I
you think
mean,
about this?"
I think that happened like all the time in our British life and culture class because we were supposed to see the
Right.
clashes and the differences, right?
Yeah.
I don't feel that I had that very often, like day to day though.
Gotcha. So it wasn't like a daily occurrence.
No.
No, that's good. I feel like because like that's another one of those like othering experiences.
Yeah.
Yeah, where it's like, oh yeah, you represent this very large and diverse place.
Yeah.
Speak for them.
And I think there were others in my program who maybe experienced that in specific circumstances, but again, like we were
Right.
kind of close knit as a group,
Sure.
so we may not have had the same experiences as some other folks who were studying abroad in London at the same time.
Yeah. Or in like another country where they're
Yeah,
like living with a host family or something like that.
right. I do remember there was like a pub we could go to connected to a college in the area, um, and I do remember we did trivia. We did trivia a fair amount there.
Sure.
We were very terrible at it. I don't know why. Probably just because we were. Um, but there was like a very specific like I don't know if it was a whole night of I can't remember if it was a whole night of trivia or if it was like just a section
Sure.
about the United States, but we did not do well.
Unfortunate.
So perhaps that has its own
Its own implications about.
yep. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, take
Oh
that for
well.
what you will.
I won't we won't hold it against you, Amy.
And they could tell we were the Americans in the room. So I would
And then you
say
weren't doing well, so it was like, oh.
yeah, not the same thing as what you're asking about, but similar
Oh,
challenges
it's a similar
perhaps.
dynamic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I got it. Okay. Cool. Um um
Oh.
we already kind of talked about this a little bit, but like obviously the UK has changed since you visited. Um if you went back now, what do you think would be different?
Oh gosh, well, I mean Brexit would be different. Uh, 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 Lots of things. I think. So that's a great question. I probably wouldn't stay where I stayed
Sure.
for many reasons. But we at the time were like located in South Kensington, which is a very wealthy district.
Sure.
And that was very challenging for like getting food and things like that because it was expensive.
Sure.
So I'd probably uh, change my actual location or go to like a smaller
Smaller area.
space outside of the city.
Right.
Can you repeat the question just because I feel like I
What
need to
what
hear it
what
again?
it, what do you think would be different about the
What do
UK?
I think would be different? I mean, I think much like other places, like the politics would be different, and I think I'd be more aware of them.
Probably.
I
Yeah.
think when I was studying abroad, I didn't pay as much attention to the politics,
Hmm.
or like the interpersonal connections that people had. Just like if I walked past them on a street, like um, I, I interacted with people, but I was also in my own experience with my classmates.
Right.
So I think I would pay more attention to those things. I think I'd have more appreciation for just like the everyday life.
Hmm.
I think there would be things that I was afraid to take the time and do that I would just go and do. But I think a lot of things would be different just because a pretty good chunk of time has passed. I think
Been
it's what been
4 or 5 years
five.
now, right?
I think it's definitely been 5 years.
Yeah.
Um, so it's been a while.
Yeah,
um,
for sure.
um,
Hmm.
it's probably not a good answer to your question, but that's kind of
That's fine. I
where I'm
mean,
at. I think things would be different. I also think, I mean, we are in a pandemic. I think it actually would be very interesting to see how
they've handled it.
they're handling it versus we're handling it here. Like that would be just purely from, if I wasn't thinking it from a personal standpoint, I think it'd be
Right.
very interesting to see, or an empathetic standpoint, I think it'd be interesting to just see the differences like straight up. But
Right.
yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of things would be different and a lot of things would be the same, right? It's a very old city.
Right.
Honestly, I would love to go back to London for a number of things, but I'd much rather go to Scotland and like spend more time there and go to more cities and not just be doing like a whirlwind trip
Yeah,
on
like
a bus,
stay and
you
like
know?
really like soak it in sort of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, I would
Yeah.
love that. And they're so much more independent from the rest of the UK. Like they're just,
Oh yeah. I mean,
you
that's
know,
just part of their history as being,
yeah,
yeah. We're
yeah,
part of the UK, but not really.
yeah. And they have a very painful history with the UK, but they're very proud of their history. And it's, I don't know, just the way that they talk about themselves, like it's just so different. So I'd rather go there. And it's beautiful. Like Scotland is just beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the natural landscape is, I
Awesome.
saw more of the natural landscape in Scotland than I did
Of England.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I feel like in England too, it's harder to see that natural landscape because it's
Yeah.
all been like it's not all developed, but like if you like see England from the sky and you're like in a plane, it's all segmented into farms and commons and like there isn't that like whereas I feel like Scotland has more of that like open it's not as developed the same way as it was in England.
Yeah. Yeah, there
So
seems to be more celebrated natural spaces.
yeah.
Yeah, England
Exactly.
it does feel much more industrialized, for lack
Right.
of a better term.
Well, they were the
I
first
do
ones
think
to do it. So
yeah, fair enough.
yeah.
I would say Richmond was cool too. It was like I believe Richmond was at like the end of Richmond Station was like, I think at the end of the tube station. Please don't quote me because it's been a while since I looked at a
Oh,
tube map.
I'm absolutely going to pull out a tube map
But
and fact check you now.
but there is an end of the line tube station that you could
Yeah.
get out to a really lovely walking park, and that was a nice break from everything, and it was so much more quiet there because the city
Right.
was smaller and
Super loud and
yeah.
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 Gotcha. That makes sense.
hmm
Awesome. Well, the last question I had was about were there any like common phrases or like
Oh,
slang that you learned?
I'm not gonna like no. I mean, yeah, probably. I can't think of any off the top of my head. It would take me a while. I think the biggest thing is that in my life I didn't swear very much, and
And
by
now
the
you
now I swear like a lot more.
and
Mostly personally,
England did
not
that
like
to you?
at people or anything, but swearing just there were certain swear words that were dropped more easily in London and some of them in England, and uh, some of them I don't use, but some of them I've found confidence in using. Not
Sure.
saying that people should swear, but that was handled differently overall there from what I experienced in England than here. Less taboo to swear randomly in public, so
Gotcha.
or to
Okay.
swear at something. Anyway,
Amy
probably
doesn't endorse
probably
it, but
not the
I do.
best
You
answer.
swear
Yeah,
as much as you want, people.
I'm not gonna drop any swear words on this call.
Use your words as you feel fit. Not on my videos, but
Nope.
whatever you feel like in public, you just go out and let it out.
Just don't do it with anger towards people because
Yeah,
that's not worth
be
it.
angry at a situation, not at a
Mhm,
person.
mhm, mhm.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, yeah, they also didn't always use like certain swear words in anger, right? Like sometimes it was just for emphasis or whatever, you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
Or just so natural to someone's cadence of speaking that they just
It's just
it
it's
would just
there.
flow.
It's
Yeah.
in there no matter
Anyway,
what. Well,
yeah.
I
I
feel
guess
like yeah.
oh also I mean like football instead of soccer, which
Oh,
like
sure.
that's such a basic answer for me to give, but like I genuinely feel bad when I say soccer now, like because it's wrong. It should be football.
Yeah.
So take that with what you will.
Yeah. I mean, I think of two things. I think
Mhm.
of Mind the Gap.
Well, yeah, okay. Yeah,
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 that's a
yeah,
big
yeah,
one.
yeah.
That's the one that I always
Please
think of.
mind the gap. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Yeah,
Please
because
mind the
the
gap.
tube is so dangerous if you don't, because the
Because
way
you'll just fall into the
and you will likely not do well from that experience. So
no, probably
either
not.
between the track or the tube itself, like
Don't do it.
no.
And
Oh
then
gosh.
the other, what was the other thing I was thinking? You were talking about how like it's like built into their like cadence of speaking, and like I thought of Ron Weasley because like that's how he is. Like he
Mhm.
like like because like Hermione is very like proper and she doesn't have that kind of like she doesn't use that kind of language unless she's really angry.
Yeah,
Like I just imagine her like punching Draco in the face. Like that's like,
yeah,
like an outburst. Whereas like Ron like says bloody whatever
yeah,
like every 10 seconds, and that's just like part of the way he speaks.
yeah.
And like I know like the Weasleys are supposed to be kind of like a caricature of like the Irish, but like
Interesting. Yeah.
they
Maybe.
I mean they are. They're
Yeah.
redheaded and
No, I'm
there's a
just
million of them, and
trying to think of
it's a
my
commentary on
yeah.
Irish Catholics. But
Mhm.
like but like which is something that English people do a lot. They like to make fun of Irish
Oh
people.
my God, yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yep. Views of the Irish and yep.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
was very noticeable in
Oh
London.
yeah.
I am
Mhm.
recalling suddenly.
Right.
Yeah. hmm
Yeah.
Not always in the best way. No.
Yeah. It
Like
makes
pretty
me
much never in the best way, actually. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. I mean it's like it surprises me sometimes where it's like Ed Sheeran's super popular and I'm
Mhm.
like, but he's not the he's like he kind of embodies that like I don't know if he's actually Irish, but like he embodies that stereotype.
Mm.
And it's like it's interesting that like the people of England have found him like an acceptable outlet of that. I feel like it's not a real comparison, but like I feel like it's the way that we celebrate black artists in the United
Mhm.
States, even though
Mhm.
we do awful and terrible things to them.
Sorry, I was just thinking when you said bloody, like I don't recall people saying bloody all that much around me. And
Maybe it
I
was a
think that's
90s
like a
thing.
perception that we have, but like I just don't remember. Like I like and I got used to everything, right? Like I got used to
Sure.
like now when I like if I am watching a movie that does have like predominantly British actors in it, like
Hmm.
it's easier to take in than it would have been before I studied abroad, right?
Right.
Like
Because
it
you're not like
feels more
filtering the
natural to
accent or
hear
anything.
them, right?
Yeah.
I just don't remember them saying bloody that often. That's fine. I
It
just feel
must
like
be a
they said
90s
the F
thing.
bomb a lot. That's all. That's and like other words that I don't say. So
Yeah,
yeah.
that's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well, before we wrap up, is there anything else you wanted to say about the UK, just like that I didn't ask about, but you're like, I really wanted to say this.
I feel like I got at the main things. I think it was just I think something about studying abroad, I guess I'd maybe like to say, not necessarily about the UK specifically, but um, if someone has the opportunity to, I just encourage them, yeah, like try new things. Be safe, right? Like if you don't know a place, like make sure you understand it before you
Decide
go
to go
out and do
there.
a bunch of different things
Right.
or decide to go there. But live it, don't just observe it. I
Yeah.
think that was something that I learned, and maybe sometimes why these questions are hard is because we didn't do a lot of touristy things. We weren't there to be tourists. We were there to live there for
Right.
a few months.
You were learning by doing and not
Right,
by observing from the outside.
right. And I think perhaps like I remember coming back and like my family asking, "What was the best thing?" or like, "Was the blah 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 was like the London Eye amazing?" or "What about London Tower the tower?" Oh
Right.
God, I'm doing such a horrible job of that. But like of recalling things. But basically they wanted to know all the tourist questions
Right.
and answers and like I couldn't give that because my experience wasn't I mean, it was brief, right, in the grand
Right.
scheme of life, but it was much more immersive and just like living it as me
Right.
than observing as someone who's there for a very short period of time.
Exactly. Yeah, your experience was different than mine because I was there for a week and we just did touristy stuff. We weren't like hanging out. It was more like, we're gonna go to the Tower of London today,
Right.
and we're gonna go to the National Museum the
Right.
next day, and yeah, like we hit all the hot spots, and like you were just like, I'm in London and I live here for 10 weeks and I'm gonna do my thing.
Right. And I don't think it's bad. I think tourism is its own thing, and it can really help places thrive. It can also have its setbacks, and I think it's a valuable way to learn, but it's not the whole. Being a tourist isn't the whole part of what it means to like immerse yourself in a place and to
Right.
study abroad.
Absolutely. That's a good
So
point.
yeah, that's I guess my last bit of information.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you again, Amy, for coming on and talking with us about your experiences and your time in the UK. And yeah, thanks again for watching Around the World. Our first video was very, very popular. And I'm hoping that this one is just as awesome because we've got great people coming and talking about cultural experience and how to be a global citizen, which is awesome. It's something that everybody should kind of strive to be. So yeah. So everybody, once again, thank you again to Amy, and we'll see you next time. I'm not sure where we're going to be talking about next, but it's going to be great. I've got plans. So see you later.
Thank you.